for 2 consecutive days was in honor of VJ Day, the end of World War II in August 1945. Several top financial firms had offices in the World Trade Center. Investment banker Morgan Stanley was the largest tenant with 20 offices on 25 floors. This is NPR News.
This is a special report from NPR News. I'm Neil Conan in Washington. We're reporting to you on one of the worst days in American history. The scale of the disaster that happened today is not yet clear, but disaster it was. 2 airplanes loaded with passengers, hijacked commercial airliners, crashed into the World Trade Center in New York City, causing both towers to collapse into the street, and many, many people collapsed along with them. In Alexandria, Virginia, across the river from Washington, D.C., another plane crashed into the Pentagon. More heavy casualties there. A 4th hijacked airliner crashed into a wooded area in southwestern Pennsylvania. We believe that was connected to the other incidents. NPR's Richard Harris is with me here in Studio 3A. And Richard, it's been a long day. What do we know now that we didn't know before? What's new?
What's new is, I suppose, focus is on lower Manhattan, where rescue crews are still plowing through the rubble of the World Trade Center. The city of New York has brought in lights, heavy machinery to dig path to get into the rubble and look around. They have reason to believe that there are still people alive in there, and obviously that's the top priority, is to find those people and rescue them. Similar rescue operations are continuing also at the Pentagon, and people are flying in, medical experts from around the country. Unfortunately, also people who are specializing in mortuary science as well are being brought in to take care of what is certain to be a large number of casualties. The 4th plane crash you mentioned in rural Pennsylvania, there are no survivors possible from that crash.
The rescue operation, again, this is all too reminiscent of the Oklahoma City bombing, but is that what we can anticipate is going on in southern Manhattan today? Absolutely.
A very similar set of circumstances, that although order of magnitude bigger than what we saw in Oklahoma. The pile of rubble is said to be 2 stories tall from the trade centers that collapsed. They obviously just fell straight down at a certain point, and it is unimaginable to think about going through that rubble to even find the black boxes, although I'm sure there was an effort to do that, to find the plane's black boxes. But
the flight recorders, the voice recorder that gets the last half hour of conversation in the cockpit, and the flight data recorder that records the plane's characteristics, its data tells it what it was doing.
That's right. And there's just so much rubble. The prospects of finding corpses, or everyone, certainly, it's not possible.
It is obviously going to be an enormous medical effort. Hospitals all through the New York metropolitan area are involved in this. It had to have been, at least in New York City, one of the great medical centers, if not the great medical center of the world, and a place that has trained for disaster.
Absolutely. There are more than 100 hospitals in New York City, and they were all brought in to participate in treating casualties, injured people, and in addition to that, special medical teams from around the country have been assembled by the Department of Health and Human Services to come in and provide more MASH-like services, essentially setting up temporary facilities where medical treatment may be minimal, but sorting through people who need urgent care and people who can wait a little bit longer, so-called triage. And so those are also going into operation.
The investigation into who may have done this is obviously just beginning. In his statement earlier this evening from the White House, President Bush said the United States will certainly make every attempt to bring those responsible to justice. He also said there would be no discrimination between those who did this and those who harbored them, suggesting that wherever these terrorists may have come from, that place where they came from is not safe.
Right, and I think that may be a reference. The prime suspect, of course, is Osama bin Laden, who has been hiding out in Afghanistan, and so presumably that is a not very veiled reference to the fact that that if we decide to retaliate as a nation, that Afghanistan should expect part of that.
Richard Harris, you're going to be with us for the remainder of the hour. We will be taking your phone calls. Where were you today when you heard the news? Please call us, 800-989-8255. That's 800-989-TALK. But I'm going to turn now to John Hamilton, NPR's John Hamilton, who's been looking into the macabre but important business of finding out how many people have died. John, what do we know about the number thus far?
Well, not very much so far. New York is still in something of a state of chaos. Communications have been very difficult. And also, officials there have been very careful not to make estimates of how many people have died, whether to avoid panic or simply to avoid getting numbers wrong. They really haven't said much. We do know a few numbers. We know that the numbers of the people who were on the 4 airplanes that crashed, and that total is 266. Also, 6 people have been reported as dying in the hospitals in New York. Those are the only confirmed deaths that we have, although presumably the number is much, much larger.
What about injuries?
Well, New York hospitals are saying that they have treated at least 600 people, and about 10 to 15% of those are people who are critically injured. Also, earlier in the day, more than 1,500 people, some estimates said 2,000 people, were taken across the water to Liberty State Park. Now, most of those people were not injured seriously and were treated for minor injuries there.
That's the old Bedloe Island. That's where the Statue of Liberty was.
Correct.
Yes. And I would also assume that in addition to these people, there had to have been smoke effect, people breathing in the huge plume of dust and ash that erupted out of this building.
Well, hospital officials said that they have had a range of injuries, and certainly a number of the people you could see on television footage were people who were literally choking on the massive cloud of dust and soot and so